Welcome to the Eclectic Radical. As always, this is Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. No co-host tonight, but I make up for it by having great guests. With us again is friend of the show and co-founder of Mind Your Vols, Renee Johnson. And also joining us tonight from the People's Voice Network is Z. Welcome, Z. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm a little sleepy, so I decided I'm going to eat dinner afterwards so I can just get even more sleepy after that. So I'm hanging in there. It's been a long day.
That's funny. I did the same thing. I was like, you know what? I'm going to hold off on eating until after we do the show.
That does make me laugh a little, just a little. Because I always eat first, and I hurry to get it done with. Because I work in the morning, and I get up at an ungodly hour of the morning to go to work.
I will say that is the one true benefit of being an educator.
Yeah.
Summer's off.
Yeah, I can see that. And even if you do teach summer school or something like that, it's usually not as early and not as long.
Short day. Yep, absolutely. Which I do not do summer school.
I can't blame you.
No.
I didn't do summer school as a student, except once where I took because I wanted to take a model rocket class. But that was the only time.
So funny story, because I went to a Catholic school, so
then you have something in common with all 6 Supreme Court justices who ruled against Roe v. Wade, and one of them who didn't, because Sotomayor also went to Catholic school.
Right, and so to be with my friends, I went to summer school one summer. Because I had friends who had to go to summer school, and I was like, well, I'm gonna be bored all day if y'all are in summer school. So I made my mother pay for me to take a typing class in summer school, which it was a bizarre choice, I will admit, but I probably type faster than most people, so I guess it came in handy eventually.
Typing has become taking a typing class in school has become one of the best. That's probably one of the only things I use from school, from primary school.
I use my typing. I had a better history teacher than most in junior high, so I got some decent stuff in junior high. But how much of your history classes pre-college are really worth anything?
Yeah.
And since I didn't go to college really, all my history is stuff that I've taught myself, just because I like reading. But typing I use, which is funny because I did not like typing in school, and did not bother to learn to touch type, and got a D in the class. And I still don't touch type now, but I type really well the way I do type. So no, it's weirder than that. It's like it's like just this, just these, and not the other two. So this.
Listen, whatever.
Sometimes I'll use my pinky, but
whatever gets it done. I do touch type though. I think I'm at 86 words per minute, which is considering I'm not the secretary is pretty good.
But it's not hunt and peck, because I know where all the keys are and I hold my hands in the right place. So even though I move my hands around and don't touch type properly, I still do what I do without having to look at the keyboard too much. So the typing class is still even though I didn't do well in the typing class,
it's ingrained.
Exactly, knowing where the keys are.
I had before I'm gonna just throw this in there. I had a typing game that was Zombie of the Dead, Typing of the Dead thing, and I would just type that. It helped out.
I can see that. Because there's the stuff like type the sentence to wipe out the zombies or
Exactly. That's how it would go.
something. And you type the sentence right, and you get to see the cool video game screen of the guy blowing the zombies.
Hey, tell me how to type.
Whatever.
Hey,
Listen,
yeah,
I really believe that like typing is a lost skill, and as someone who works in a high school and sometimes reads what the kids write and they all use acronyms, and I'm like, this is a paper for English. Can you spell that out? Like, you can't.
It's like LOL.
This is not a text message, my friend. This is your homework assignment. You gotta fix that. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Handwriting's also a lost art. You know, my little one knows how to write in script, and I have juniors in high school that don't know what it means to sign their name in script. It's pretty bad.
I used to have such great handwriting, and now I just scrawl all over the place like I don't care. And it's because nobody puts any value on the ability to write longhand anymore. It's never done.
Yep.
No.
It's pretty bad. I don't know. I feel like it's a lost art. I feel like everybody should still learn. I feel like when you get to your junior year in high school and you have to sign your name on your standardized test, that you should know how to sign your name.
I mean, that seems fair.
My hand hurts now. Like, it's like I've done so much. I just type all the time, and then when I try to write a long paper with just with my hand, I'm just like, ow.
So, on the subject that I hinted at before of the Supreme Court when we mentioned Catholic school, and I gotta say, I hate to sound like an English Whig denouncing James II before the Glorious Revolution, but is it a little bit crazy that we have all of these gung-ho anti-abortion Catholic judges at the same time?
I mean, it could be crazy or well planned.
Well, but I mean, when you think about it, what's weird about it is, you know, I'm old enough. Again, I say I'm old enough because I was born back then, but I don't really remember it or anything like that. You know what I'm talking about. But when I was a young child, I was born 2 years before the Southern Baptist Convention changed its position on abortion officially. See, in 1973, the Southern Baptist Conference endorsed Roe v. Wade as the right thing for poor women in the South. And in 1974 and 1975, the Southern Baptist Conference was still in favor of a woman's right to an abortion because her future mattered more than a potential child. And these were poor women in the South who might die if in a pregnancy complication if they didn't have access to abortion. But in 1979, they turned around and went gung-ho anti-abortion. Now, what's interesting about this is in 1976, Ronald Reagan ran for president. And Ronald Reagan was an evangelical who had been a Catholic, but who had become a lapsed Catholic and wasn't going to church, and then started going to an evangelical church and became born again. So that's where his ideas about gay people especially came from, and why he was such a disaster as president during the AIDS crisis. But he, as an ex-Catholic turned evangelical, was sort of perfectly positioned to bring Catholics into the Republican Party when he ran for president again in 1980. But they needed to make sure that Catholics had a good home for their anti-abortion position. And so you see this change among the evangelical Christians who make up a lot of the Republican Party in 1978, 1979, from being pro-abortion to being anti-abortion. And some of them, like Jerry Falwell Sr., cash in on it around the same time by opening up an adoption charity, which Jerry Falwell Jr. still runs, and which was apparently very interested in being able to get its hands on as many unaccompanied minor children as possible, for all the at the border, mind you, for all the good white Christian couples who want kids. So that's our Supreme Court, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think?
I think that human trafficking is alive and well, and just is legal in its own way, and euphemisms, right? Like,
Hey,
we're really good at making things look really good, but it's just like the worst fucking thing ever. That's just how we always do it.
I mean,
everything's always the worst possible way. If there's a worst way to do it, that's the way it's done. We're gonna go with that way. We're gonna go with the most horrifying way to get it done.
And this shatters the last of my childhood illusions, because, of course, being the age I am, my favorite show growing up was Different Strokes, and it's like, dang it, even adoption doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's just like adoption. I thought that was like at least something like wholesome, but like then you like read about it, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah.
But even when you look at like child protective services and, you know, all these things that are supposed to be in place to make sure that like kids are okay, and none of them work that way. You know, there's so much corruption in those systems. There's so much like mistreatment in those systems. It's like there's no winning. If you are not a person with the right color and the right tax bracket, there's almost no winning unless you can finagle your way around the system and sneak in and do something you're not really supposed to do, but you manage to make it work.
This is a good point, because in 1977, a Supreme Court decision opened up the way for political action committees, and the new conservative PACs did hijack the 1980 election for Reagan in a big way. He was probably going to win anyway, because he was the big star running against Ford in 1976, who did better than expected.
Right.
But it was really no contest anymore after they basically ran the table in the primaries, and that was only the second or third time they'd had a full primary in every state before the presidential election, where all the candidates ran, which is a fun bit of history.
I didn't know that.
All the candidates didn't even compete in all the primaries in 1964. Lyndon Johnson ran. Lyndon Johnson didn't have to run in the primaries because he was the vice president. He really didn't have an opponent. He was just sort of pro forma on the ballot. Goldwater had to run against Nelson Rockefeller.
Okay.
Nelson Rockefeller and Goldwater tied in the New York primary where they both campaigned. Rockefeller won the other primary, and Goldwater won a primary in like Oregon or someplace that you wouldn't think mattered. But by the time it actually came to the convention, Goldwater had all the delegates. So the primaries weren't as big a deal back then. They started to become a big deal in 76 was really the first election where everybody ran in the Democratic Party primary in every primary. And the Republicans did the same thing just because, I think.
That's interesting. I didn't know any of that.
Well, for the Democrats, it's about all the little things they did.
So I guess I have a little bit of an excuse.
It's all the little part of all the little things the Democrats did to make sure that even another George McGovern wouldn't get nominated again, let alone a Jesse Jackson or a Bernie Sanders.
Right.
I know those three names. They all got destroyed.
Well, McGovern got destroyed because literally, and this doesn't get written about or talked about enough, the Democratic Party was already selling McGovern out like before the convention was over. A reporter interviewed his future running mate. That's the best part. This was Jim Eagleton, who would be McGovern's first running mate before he dropped him because of his electroshock therapy for his post-traumatic stress disorder from World War II. Because it was such a big deal that a vice presidential candidate had electroshock therapy. Even for something like his war experiences, that he ended up getting dropped from the ticket. But anyway, Eagleton said before the convention was over, after McGovern was nominated, to a reporter that he didn't even know what McGovern was for except acid, amnesty, and abortion, which ended up becoming one of Richard Nixon's attack slogans against McGovern. So McGovern's future running mate, he wasn't the vice president yet, but McGovern's future running mate handed Nixon's slogan just by talking to a reporter. The Democrats undercut McGovern in every way because they knew the unions were totally invested in the McGovern campaign. And if McGovern lost humiliatingly, they could start moving from union-financed elections to corporate-financed elections. The DCCC came along after that, the party primaries, the superdelegates, all the whole rigmarole that we know now as the sort of televised election cycle.
Which I don't even know. The whole thing is so infuriating. And, you know, when you consider this push, like I never want to be a person who says don't vote, right? Because me personally, as a Black person, I just can't, I can't bring myself to be like, just don't vote. But I understand why people don't vote. And I don't begrudge people for not voting. And I'm not going to tell somebody, oh, you're horrible, you have to go vote. Me personally, I'm going to vote. It may mean that I only vote on one thing on the whole ticket. But I'm going to go. I'm going to, do the thing. But it's hard when you consider how little they get done. And, this whole give us money, we're raising money, we need to raise money, we need to, all these emails, and nothing that we were supposed to get after this whole, you got to go to the ballots in Georgia, you got to support Georgia, we got to win the Senate, because in order to do anything, we got to have the Senate, this whole thing that they did, and it was just a setup, because nothing that they said was going to happen happened. Literally nothing that they promised was going to happen.
One thing that Biden promised happened. Nothing has changed.
That's true. Nothing fundamentally changed.
Nothing has fundamentally changed.
Well, it may have gotten worse.
Well, material conditions may have gotten worse, but nothing has fundamentally changed in the systems that keep making them worse.
Right.
True.
I think they might be worse only in the sense that things were so bad with Trump that people were like, we got to get him out. We got to get him out. And I think people actually had this expectation that as long as we get him out, things will get a little bit better because they can't get worse. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's worse.
The very
a lot of stuff that's the same, and in my opinion, if it's the same, it's worse because it was supposed to get better, right? Like,
well, the best example is all the brunch liberals stopped going to Black Lives Matter protests as soon as Biden won.
Right.
They went from being brunch liberals and hardcore anti-capitalists and actual black groups to being just actual black groups and a few hardcore anti-capitalists. All the brunch liberals went home. And even some of the hardcore anti-capitalists went home if they were white. Let's be fair.
Right.
Also,
and
I mean, Black Lives Matter did tweet that the headquarters, where they spun all the cash. They tweeted that we won when it's over, pretty much, when Biden won. So,
but cops have not stopped shooting people.
No. But it was over for them.
They've shot more people in less time so far in 2022.
Mm-hmm. And they're getting significantly more violent. And, I hate to be actually, I don't hate to be it. I love to be the I told you so person because I want to be like, told you. So I feel like all these things that are happening now, I saw that video from Newport, Rhode Island with the bunch of kids, and the kid, one got thrown into a light pole, another one got punched in the face by the police. And Newport, Rhode Island is a pretty affluent place. That is not a place where stuff like that typically you would imagine.
Because normally cops don't hit rich kids.
Right.
That's my city was on that too. Greenville, South Carolina, for the same thing. We're the same type of city. That doesn't that doesn't happen here.
And I really, it's not that these kids, obviously no one deserves that treatment, but I literally tweeted maybe y'all should have stuck with the whole BLM thing.
The one that really gets me because
they kept fighting against the whole police out of control immunity, they could do whatever they want, because this is what happens, right? It always starts with the most marginalized community.
Exactly.
And once they realize they can get away with it and people get used to it and everybody's okay with it, then they move on and they start doing it to everybody else. So,
and to really drive the symbolism home, around 2021, I'm surprised it wasn't in the news longer, but then I guess it's not the sort of thing that they wanted white people to know cops were doing. But around 2021, somewhere in western Louisiana, eastern Texas, that area, a county sheriff's deputy pulls over a white girl and shot her. Now, how often do you hear about cops in the South shooting white women?
I didn't even know that happened. So
I didn't know that was a thing. I thought that.
Well, so one of the first rules of the so-called the so-called Knights of the South, by which I mean cops and their Klan friends. I'm sorry, Klan and their cop friends. I got that backwards for a
Klan runs the South. That's just how it goes.
But in the philosophy of the Knights of the South, white women are something special and above, to be protected and not ever to be harmed by anyone but their husband. And a cop in the South shoots a white lady. That's kind of a big deal, especially if you understand how their warped code works. Exactly. And so if they're shooting the white ladies, nobody's safe.
I'm gonna actually write a script about that, about the white knightness and how the birth of a nation being is all just from all the shootings that have been happening and everything. And I've been writing that.
Yeah,
done with the script. I just have to make the video and edit and everything. So
yeah, but yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, it's utterly out of control. It's totally out of control. And Border Patrol, they just got more lenient on. They got all kinds of immunity now. And people don't understand, they think control and they think Texas, but almost the entire country is a border, because
Yeah.
you have to be like really landlocked to not be
Well,
at a
there
border. And the border, I think it's like, isn't it like 100
it's
miles?
100 miles from the border.
Right. So you're going a long distance from a border in, and that's a lot
And
of
of course,
freedom
ICE
for people to have. And yeah, it's out of control.
ICE goes everywhere they think there's someone that they can grab.
Yep. Yep.
And it's disgusting, because both the Border Patrol and ICE, and one of my favorite past guests, who I hope to have on again, Brooke Binkowski of trutherfiction.com, used to be a journalist on the border. And one of the things that she said often was that the Border Patrol are basically Nazis, and ICE are basically Nazis. And you have these deeply ingrained Nazi cultures of keeping the impure out of the sanctum of holiness. And it's really over the top.
Well, I want to piggyback off that. Just like we were talking about the simple fact that, one group, the group of like, pretty much white liberal women, have not been on the train of like BLM and things like that. ICE, another situation, the border and sterilization happening at the border. That story, like how long did people pay attention to that? If people were mad about that for like 2 minutes, and that's been going on for years.
The doctor who was exposed started sterilizing women when Obama was still president. So it wasn't just a Trump doctor. And that's why this story went away. If it had just been on Trump's watch, that would have been in so many news cycles. But once they realized, oh my gosh, he was doing this when Obama was president, it disappeared.
Which is crazy. And, and all these, and you have to wonder, like, what are these people getting paid? Like, you're getting paid to harass people, but you can't do anything that's actually going to save a life, because they just found all those bodies in that truck in Texas. And so you mean to tell me you have all these people who have all these powers and all these freedoms, and they could chase people all over the country, but you have literally a truck full of dozens of people dying in the heat, and nobody noticed?
The Border Patrol being able to do everything it does is why, of course, people pay to be in the back of that truck. Because let's not forget that the people who died in the back of that truck paid exploitative fees or mortgaged their labor for years to come in the future in order to be in the back of that truck.
They were actually like getting
and they were in the back of that truck because they paid to be in the back of that truck, because they did not want to get put in a cage at the border and sent back. And they were willing to do, they had the resources to do what they thought they had to do to avoid taking that risk. And they ended up trusting the wrong guy and dying in the back of a truck. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because Greg Abbott says, like a stupid asshole, this is because of Joe Biden's open border policies. No, if the border was open, no one would have to hide in the back of a truck to come in.
So I have Bluetooth in my car, and I would just get in the car today, and I was listening, like, for some reason there was like Sean Hannity show was on or some shit, and I was like, oh fuck. But then I started listening to it for a second. Exact same thing. It's like literally people murdered at the border because of open borders and blah blah blah. It's just like, this is some old bullshit.
If the border were open, there would not need to be shooting at the border ever, because it's open.
Right.
I mean, unless Mexico invades.
You would need people on horses with whips.
Now, the border. I will say, not to defend the Border Patrol, but just in the interests of being technical, they were whipping them with their reins. They didn't have actual whips, but they have those long Texas reins, and they were whipping those people with their reins. They don't issue the Border Patrol whips yet. Hopefully it won't get that far. But I can't count on it right now.
No,
Can't count on it.
You can only count on everything just getting completely more out of control.
Hopefully someone is listening to me and having a conversation off Twitter somewhere about starting up a community council for self-defense and mutual aid. But short of that, I agree. It's just going to get worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And all these decisions. So I struggle with the state of protest and what people are doing right now, because I feel like it's not working, right? And that this is what happens. Like something happens, everybody takes to the street. They take to the street for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, whatever. Nothing changes. And then the focus gets pushed somewhere else. And so, growing up in New York in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s, when, there was a lot of police violence going, and my mother was running her soles of her shoes off, walking and protesting. And she was like, and nothing happens. It's just this constant cycle of like, you get mad, you fight, you scream, you walk, you march, you make your signs, whatever. But then what is actually happening to change the material conditions? And I just don't see anything moving in that direction. And when I consider the people in history who I most respect, who were seeking to actually change the material conditions, they all ended up shot and dead. So it's such a hard space to be in, because I know in my heart that, like, you go out, you make a noise so you can feel like you're doing something, but in feeling like you've done something, what have you actually done? I don't know how to actually push towards something that's going to have some actual material change happen.
Right.
And I don't know what it is. I mean, I do a lot of volunteering with Socialist Alternative, and like if we hear of a Starbucks that's trying to unionize, or when the Amazon was we'd go out, and I feel like that changes. That's like a change, but it's a local change. Like
in South Africa, they blew up police stations.
That's one of the reasons Nelson Mandela went to jail.
That was one of the reasons Nelson Mandela was in prison.
True.
So let's start right now by telling anybody who may not know this, that most of what you know about Nelson Mandela has been whitewashed.
Oh yeah.
Hardcore.
Nelson Mandela was not Martin Luther King Jr. The fact that Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't Martin Luther King Jr. is a topic for another show, or maybe later in this one.
He was. They're just gonna say he was holding, like he was strapped, and people don't even know that. Like,
yeah. And he had armed bodyguards from the Christian Defense League a lot, because even though he was not a big believer in violent protest, he did not want to get shot. That was not something he planned for or hoped for.
Peaceful, not stupid.
Exactly. And but yeah, Nelson Mandela was not even the real Martin Luther King, but was definitely not the whitewashed Martin Luther King that he is portrayed as in much modern folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson Mandela was the leader of a guerrilla group that was on the U.S. terror list, that blew up police stations and assassinated corrupt pro-apartheid politicians, mostly judges. And I hear some people thinking, that's awful. Why would you assassinate judges? And I won't answer that question. But I will say, now let's talk about the Supreme Court, which just overturned Roe versus Wade. And there is not an elective solution.
No.
So, because it doesn't matter if you elect all the Democrats, in 2022, even if you elect all the Democrats in 2022, you are still waiting for a judge to retire or die.
Right.
And so there's not an elected solution. You're not going to magically get Roe back by voting for Democrats the way every moderate and liberal in the Democratic Party who hasn't stood up enough for abortion is sending people letters saying, give me money to save abortion rights. I guarantee you that pro-abortion Henry Cuellar is sending out, give me money to save abortion rights from the evil Republicans in his district, despite being pro-abortion.
Right. Right.
They just visited him like a couple weeks ago. So
Nancy Pelosi had to go down there to make sure he beat the pro-abortion candidate.
Right. Right.
Don't get me started on Pelosi, because this gets back to she and Biden have some things in common with those 6 Supreme Court justices. To be fair, only 5 of them are actually Catholic, or only 5 of them admit to being Catholic, which is, here's where it gets even scarier. I remember hearing about how suspicion of Catholics was this awful, racist, bigoted thing. And yet one day in the future, we have a Supreme Court justice who went to Catholic school, was a Catholic most of his life, but goes to his English wife's Episcopal church now, but doesn't call himself an Episcopalian. He just says, I attend my wife's Episcopal church. So he doesn't say he's an Episcopalian and lie. And he doesn't say he is a Catholic and debunk the belief that he's Episcopalian. This is Neil Gorsuch, of course. Mm-hmm. Do we have an actual crypto-Catholic on the Supreme Court? And how weird is that? That something in the past that was said not to be a thing is now a real thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, full disclosure, I am a Catholic.
Oh, I figured.
Now I'm probably one of the world's worst Catholics because
if you listen to the American Council of Bishops, it's you and the Pope.
Right. So, I just, I feel like with all things where you think about religion is like a suggestion, right? Like it suggests that you do these things, but you also have to put it a little bit of like common sense, human decency,
unless
core things that
unless you're a rich kid who goes to an Ivy League university and has enough comfort in other areas that you're literally able to devote your entire life to one day striking down Roe v. Wade.
Right.
Because I'm going to single out poor Neil Gorsuch again here to say that Neil Gorsuch was such a right-winger in college, he lived in the Harvard Federalist Society. He was one of the 6 kids who lived in the Federalist Society on campus full-time.
Federalist Society is most of the judges who are attacking people like Donziger and Assange
the Federalist Society is the Republicans' outlet for conservative judges. It has been accused by journalists whose word I value highly of being kind of a Nazi organization, which I believe when I see them platform people like Mike Cernovich in their publication, The Federalist. So I'm shocked that anyone might still think Gorsuch is even a little bit moderate, knowing he lived in the Federalist Society at Harvard. I mean, someone who lives at the Federalist Society at Harvard is someone who really does plan to become a judge to strike down Roe one day. It's just Gorsuch's luck that he was the first one in his class to do it. And I don't mean, I should not paint Catholicism with a broad brush, and I apologize. However, there is something called political Catholicism. It's in Europe they call it Christian democracy. In the United States, it's the silent partner in the mostly evangelical pro-life movement. Because while you always hear evangelicals talking about it, the judges are so often Catholics. Catholic judges aren't suspected of being evangelicals. So, you know, that seems like a blind. Well, they can't be with the religious right. They're not evangelicals. You're not a Catholic, are you, sir? You haven't read any of the communications between the Pope and the American Council of Bishops.
Yeah.
This is still my favorite story, because I would desperately love Pope Francis to be Oscar Romero and not Pope Francis, and he's not. But I can't help but like him anyway, because they literally elected 2 popes in a row to stop Vatican II from becoming church law. And Pope Francis just comes out and says, Vatican II is church law and bishops need to follow it. Cue angry response from American Conference of Bishops, of course. But I have to put that out there. Actually saying bishops better really actually follow Vatican II is literally what they've been terrified of since John Paul I died, because he was the last one to say it.
I don't know much about the Catholic Church, to be honest.
So, Vatican II was the Catholic Church's answer to the 60s, basically.
Okay.
And while it did not come out and say, okay, it's okay to be gay, okay, it's okay to have an abortion, okay, it's okay to have sex outside of marriage, or any of these things, what it did was it said our attitude towards sin needs to be loving and forgiving rather than condemnatory, and that we need to perhaps reconsider that our viewpoint on these issues is not the only viewpoint in the world, and we need to be 100% sure that our viewpoint comes from God and not our own prejudices. And so, while it didn't actually really liberalize all that much in terms of changing the church's stance, it was basically telling everybody, look, eventually we're probably going to have to change some of these stances, and you need to start thinking nice about people instead of mean about people right now, because pretty soon someone's going to make you forgive them. And they hated that. One of the worst kept secrets about American bishops is they hate forgiving people.
Yeah, they do for all the, go pledge your sins and confession and all these things for a religion that really is supposed to be based on this idea that your sins can be forgiven. It got a long list of stuff you're not supposed to be doing, and a long list of like hell and damnation if you don't follow along with what you're told to do. And there are, one of the things that I went a long time without going to church, and my husband brought me to his church, and the father that was there was so different. Like he was basically like, everybody got to live their life and be happy and love each other and take care of each other. And that's what's really important. And I started actually liking going to church again because it was someone who was, talking about be a human and like treat people like they're humans. And like, it doesn't have to be about, following this strict, because when you really consider, like, the Bible was written by people, right? Like, it's all stories. Like,
let's be honest. The Bible was written in most cases, best case scenario, hundreds of years after the events being discussed happened.
Right.
And in worst case,
you can't live your life by a doctrine that was essentially a retelling of a story, and nobody really knows what the true history is. And given, given how different Jesus looks in most pictures than he does when described in the Bible, like, that alone should tell you you can't go by.
I will be right back. I have to go ahead and keep talking. I have to let my cat out of here.
No, it's okay.
Someone mentioned liberation theology in the chat. Yeah, Jared Brown. Yeah, and liberation theology is really cool. James H. Cone, he was an African American preacher, and he I think Martin Luther King and like a lot of people, like Cornel West talks about him a lot, and he has black theology, black power and church. There's a lot. He wrote a lot of good books about that. He also wrote The Cross and the Lynching Tree, which is like a really, 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 really good book about the symbolism between the lynching tree and cross.
Cone is extremely radical. More white people need to read Cone. Even if they don't like it, they need to read Cone.
He will hurt some. He's going to hurt some white people's feelings, but
fuck that.
Yeah, they'll get over it.
Well, I mean, and that's the whole thing, is if you're not willing to have your feelings hurt and get over it and suck it up, then I'm sorry, you're the soy boy, not me.
Right.
You're the one who's so fragile you can't admit you don't know something or learn something different.
Right.
Oh, I mean, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, that's a good book too.
Oh yes.
I'm gonna remind you to send me all the book titles, because I read a lot, like a lot, but life sucks so bad that I mostly read nonsense, because like I'm like I can't. I read heavy stuff, but I mostly don't read heavy stuff just because life is heavy.
Exactly.
And like reading's my escape, right? Like I read so that I don't have to deal with the stuff that's in front of me every day. But I do need to. There's a whole list of stuff that I know I need to read. And
as a teacher and a communist, you should read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, just because it's for communist teachers.
And straight up is like that is what that is for. Just like and he was like really good about being like he said this was for Marxists and Christians. Yeah, he literally says that in the book.
Okay.
Well, he was from Brazil, so he understood liberation theology, and that's not totally all the way apart anymore. That's why I said I really wish Pope Francis was Oscar Romero.
Yeah, liberation theology is such a cool facet of religion. Like that's what I've been trying to get into a lot lately.
I come from, and I do not completely follow all the tenets of my church anymore. I have rejected pacifism. I'll be straight up about that. I have rejected pacifism as taught by my church and as professed by most Christian anarchists. But that said, I mean, I really started out as a Christian anarchist. Christian anarchy comes from the peace churches. The first American Christian anarchists were Quakers. The first Christian anarchists of any kind were the Munster Anabaptists, some of whose converts later became the Mennonites, which is my church, who took over a city in Germany and turned it into an anarchist commune during the 1500s. Didn't last very long. Catholic Germany came in and took the city back, but they changed all the rules while they lasted.
Yeah, the communes. It's like those cool parts in history, and it's like the state comes in, destroys it.
That's always the uncool part there at the end.
Yeah.
Also, I won't say that people were perfect. The Munster Anabaptists were kind of tough on the folks who liked the old way too much. Some of the same sort of things that people running away from Lenin complained about in the USSR later, or that some of the people running away from Castro complained about in Cuba when they got to Florida a couple years later. But, nobody's ever going to be happy with radical change like that. And there's always going to be some people who don't want to give up what they have and will try to fight it and make it out to be something bad.
Yep. The thing that I heard, and I heard it like 3 times over the course of a day and a half. And I was like, okay, clearly it's something I need to remember, is that to the privileged, equality feels like oppression.
Yes.
And I will always, always have that in the back of my mind, that if you have a lot, the idea that you have to give up even a little bit is like so outrageous.
Whoa.
It's so like, oh my God, I have to give this thing up, without even considering that you have more than you need. So you don't, you can give up if you have, $150 million, like it won't kill you to give up $1 million. Like you'll be okay. I think you'll survive it. You'll be fine.
Not even a little bit.
I mean, it's
that
like
smaller yacht.
Right.
It's just it's just so ridiculous too. I mean, either Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk could solve homelessness in this country and still be rich. The UN had a plan for Elon Musk told the UN, all right, put together a serious plan to solve global hunger and I'll fund it for you. And they put together the plan and gave it to him. He's like, this won't work. This isn't serious, and wouldn't give him any money.
Right.
And when you're dealing with rich people like this, then you understand why rich people were running from Lenin. And there's this whole economic theory here in the United States that calls itself libertarianism and is anything but. And one of the great thinkers of libertarian economics was a man named James Buchanan, not the president, who was stupid, but an economist who sadly was pretty smart, though his theory is evil. I mean, that's really the only way to describe it. It's evil. But James Buchanan starts with this principle that the rich are free because they're rich, and that depriving them of any of their wealth is depriving them of freedom, and that taxing the rich to pay for a welfare state is like slavery. So
that's really what they think.
These rich people believe that if they have to pay taxes to give benefits to poor people, especially poor Black people, then they, as rich people, will feel like they are slaves owned by the poor people whose taxes are benefiting.
I'm gonna ask James Buchanan to have slaves
but that's the whole fundamental theory of Buchanan's economics, that putting constraints on the rich is making them slaves to the state, and that the rich need to be free from the state, and that ordinary people don't really matter very much because the rich are the free society. And it really tells you how people see us.
Right.
At any working
not
people.
even understanding that, like, you have the freedoms you have because of the regular working class people that do all your work, right? like the rich person who's able
they
to
completely understand that.
Go.
They think that's normal. They think that by working for them, we are morally bettering ourselves. And that they really do deserve this because they are the elect. And they are going to heaven. And probably not 100% all of the rich people completely buy into that degree of Calvinism. But a lot of them do. And those are the people who are willing to see a nuclear war happen because they know they're going to heaven anyway.
Well, they think they are.
Think isn't the right word. You can say they're right, you can say they're wrong, but they know it. They can be completely wrong, but they know it. It's not a matter of belief for them. They know it. They are certain. They have complete 100% confident faith that they're going to heaven. And so it doesn't matter what they do. That's scary.
Actually, it's very scary.
That's what we're dealing with, even though they're technically Catholic and are supposed to know better. I mean, Renee, you'll have to tell me if the stuff I hear about Catholic guilt is all made up or not.
Oh, no, it's real.
Yeah, so they're supposed to know better than all these evangelicals.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I really think that the judges on the Supreme Court have this same attitude of, I know I'm going to heaven because I'm doing God's work. That these evangelicals do. They think, and Catholicism does not work like this. I'm not a Catholic and I know this.
Right.
But it's like they think that by ending abortion, they're writing their own get out of hell free card forever.
Right.
And that's not how any religion works. Not mine, not the Catholics, not the Jews, not the Muslims. Nobody's religion works that way.
No. I mean, at its core, all religion, like when you really get to the core of what it means to be spiritual and to believe in a higher thing and to have faith that there's something greater than you, like, it's all about love, right? It's all about loving other people enough that you exude that, right? Like, you do everything out of the belief that you should love everybody equally and treat everybody equally because you love everybody the same. So any person who in their religious beliefs don't go along with that premise, you're actually not following what your religion is teaching. Like, all religions teach that. Like,
I mean, I'm not
all of them. And like, you look at these evangelical, like, I can't even stomach it sometimes when I listen to these people.
I'm not a Joe Scarborough fan, and I know he's being hypocritical because he defended a guy who killed an abortion doctor for free before he was in Congress. So he's being hypocritical when he says this. But he also rightly points out that if you read the red letters in the New Testament, Jesus doesn't say squat about abortion. Even more than that, the guy who makes all their stupid imaginary rules for them, the Apostle Paul, also doesn't say anything about abortion. He does sort of say that, you really shouldn't be gay. You want to make sure your preachers are married so that there's none of that weird stuff going on that happens at pagan temples. But he also says, well, for me, it's been best not to be married. So who knows what he's implying there. But But all that aside, none of this stuff that they care about the most is in Jesus's words or Paul's words. It all goes back to the Old Testament that they claim not to believe in anymore. And you really think about that. You really compare what this evangelical faith says about the Old Testament and about Jewish people with their obsession with a set of rules that come from the Old Testament and not the New Testament. I didn't mean to talk so much about religion today, but I guess it goes along with the Supreme Court.
You can't yet. I mean, you can't take those two apart because that definitely they definitely have a religious agenda going on.
It's just I never thought I would be complaining about a papist conspiracy. That's just so 1710 or something.
Well, I mean, we are literally going backwards. So
it's true.
You know.
Well, I believe, I've said this a couple times, and I really believe that stating it this strongly is the only way to drive it home. I believe there is a faction of this country who takes what we were just talking about James Buchanan so seriously that they think Andrew Jackson was being a radical communist when he let all white men vote. And they would like to take the vote back from even white men who don't own property. I believe they would go that far if they thought they could get away with it.
There's a book called White Trash by Nancy Eisenberg. That's a really good book. It talks about like the first white people who came here and then how they split the classes up and they're just like, not those white people. They don't deserve any land. But then another good book. You have talking about evangelicals. I was American Fascism by Chris Hedges. That's a really good one. That's a really good book. Talks about the Christo-fascism and the section of Dominion that's like has like what they have like all the TV stations and like 100 million viewers and all of them Pat Robertson, the 700 Club.
Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell Sr., a couple of other people who are dead now like Jerry Sr., they're the people who decided essentially, okay, evangelicals are going to be anti-abortion now. Pat Robertson may be the last of that original group still alive.
Yeah. Actually.
It's scary that he's still alive. But that's a whole nother thing. And it's just the callousness where they decided we're going to make this religious decision about what we believe because we want to bring Catholics to the Republican Party and convince them we don't hate them as much as we really do. But we're going to be nice to the Catholics now until we get rid of abortion and the gay folks. Then we can do whatever we want with the Catholics. Because evangelicals are thinking like that. Because they don't like... I don't know if you guys know who Jack Chick is.
I'm not familiar with Jack Chick.
Jack Chick is a bad cartoonist and worse evangelist who puts out these awful comics called Chick Tracts.
Oh,
Chick Tracts are these awful little comics with this sort of gross, now you're going to hell punchline to them.
I've actually seen some of those.
About how bad it is about how bad gay people and abortion and Catholics are. There's also some stuff about why you have to be nice to Jewish people but shouldn't believe their religion. It's just really twisted stuff, but the Chick Tracts are one of the biggest ways that a lot of people get sucked in. They're reading these little funny comics and as bad as they are, you have to laugh at some of them, because if you don't understand, oh my gosh, this is bigoted, it'll suck you in. And it's one of those ways that seemingly stupid propaganda sucks lots of people in, because they don't take it seriously in the first place. It's so stupid. So it's like, there's no harm in reading this. Oh, it's funny to laugh at this. What if this is true? And one day people are like, what if all this weird shit I've been reading is true? I'm going to be an evangelical just in case.
Yeah. And that, that's how it all starts, right? Like,
yeah,
mindless garbage.
You start, right? Like you see a little bit, you get pulled in a little bit, you start, well, maybe this, and the next thing you know, you're doing something crazy, because
at some point you ask yourself, am I really going to hell? Should I actually, just in case, be maybe trying not to go to hell?
Right.
And it's insidious.
It's all just terrifying.
It is. It is. And like,
it's terrifying when I really stop and think about like all the things that can go wrong. And like, you know, I've said this before on multiple things, like, I'm okay. I have a job, I have insurance, you know, like I'm not worried about like not having a roof over my head. Like when I think about how quickly it could really just change, like everything could just change. And I don't know, there's no way to predict it. There's no way, you know, if something really bad happened, like none of those kids and families who sent their children to school in Uvalde that day thought that was how their day was going to end. Like, you just don't know. Mm-hmm. You know, none of the people who went supermarket shopping in Buffalo thought that's how the day was going to end. Like, you just don't know when something crazy is going to happen, and everyone is absolutely losing their minds, and with reason. Like, things are not normal. This is not normal. It is not normal to have a list of things that, as a Black person, I can get killed while doing. Like, how is that possible? That's to have song. Like a list of stuff, you know what I mean? Like, how is that possible? And as the mother of a boy, it's terrifying. And I remember very clearly when Tamir Rice was killed, thinking to myself, like, if that happened to my son, it would be my fault, right? Because he's half me. My husband is not Black. So, you know, it would be because I was his mother. You know what I mean? And I cried, like, I bawled my eyes out, really thinking about like just being part of me put him in danger. Like, that's an awful.
I think about that. Well, I have another daughter, but I have my 2 daughters too. So it's just like,
right.
I think about the same thing. It's like, that's half me. Like, I'm that. It's not our fault. Like, that's just the way like the bullshit system is. But it's just like, but still, it doesn't help. Like that, you know. It's like I have put a target on their backs essentially.
Well, I have the comfort of knowing that when someone does come for me, it will be entirely because of what I've done and said. So at least there's that, right?
Well,
I know why this is happening.
we continue to speak out, and that's what's important.
Right.
Well, I mean, somebody's got to,
right? Like, I can't even tell you how many times me and Chris end up on like these bizarrely long Twitter conversations where we're like going back and forth about something. And, you know, I so appreciate having someone who is Chris, who, like, I know if he sees something that I say, he's gonna be like, yeah, mm-hmm. That's right. That's true. And like, it's not, you know, because there's so many people who are completely unaware, right? And They are unaware sometimes by choice, like I'm just gonna act like this thing is not a thing, right? And sometimes they're unaware because they live in the middle of a place where they've literally never seen a Black person, right? So they have no sense of what that means, right? Like what does it mean to have to be around somebody that you've been told your whole life is a certain way, and then you meet that somebody and you're like, oh, wait, hold on.
I'll tell you exactly what my problem is, though, and how I got to be the way I am now. When I was a kid in the 80s watching Different Strokes, I ate that shit up. I thought we were all people together, and race didn't matter anymore, and a rich white guy could adopt 2 Black kids and learn from them as well as, and they wouldn't be forced to be white, and all this stuff that, you know, is in no way like reality. But I ate that stuff up as a kid. I believed that people really were all the same, regardless of what they looked like or who they worshiped. I just bought into all that garbage that they tell you about how that's how everyone feels and how you're supposed to feel. And I was like, okay, yeah, I want to be friends with everybody. And soon enough, I found out that some people really do suck, and you don't want to be friends with them. But you know, the same principle still applies. Is I'm going to write people out of my life for their asshole qualities, not for the things they can't change about themselves. People choose to be assholes or not. I know that when someone writes me off, it's because I'm an asshole. If not from my own point of view, from theirs.
Right. And it's a tricky, you know, it's a tricky thing to navigate. You know, where I went to high school, there were a lot of rich people, a lot of white people, a lot, you know, it was a very different environment. But some of those girls that I met then are still my very best friends, right? We're like, I'm on a group chat with like 8 girls that I went to high school with, which is absurd because we graduated like 30 something years ago. So it's like crazy that we're still friends. But you know, we learned a lot from each other, right? Like I learned a lot about what white people see and what they think, and it allowed me to navigate in spaces that I really should not have been able to navigate in looking the way I look, right? And also I was able to, you know, I have friends who, a girlfriend in high school who will straight up say to me, like, there are things that I do right now because I see you when something happens, right? And that changes how I react to things because I love you enough that I know I would never want this to happen to you. So I'm not going to let it happen to anyone else who looks like you, right? Like, and that's a big deal to know that, like, that's what happens, like that can happen in the world. And when, you know, the other thing I always tweet about is like, you can't, this whole like class, you can't separate class and race because race was literally created to separate class. Like it was literally created in order to separate class. So if you try to pick one apart from the other, you're going to fail every time because you can't, it's impossible to do it. Now I get completely shit on every time I say it, but you know what? I'm willing to deal with that because I know I'm right? I know, like, you never, that fight is never going to work. It's never, ever, ever going to work if you think you're going to be able to just fight class and ignore race because it can't happen.
And you can say race is a social construct all you like. Yes, of course it's a social construct, but so is class. Class is not something that magically sprang from the earth and was always imposed upon us by divine order. Class is something that started when they stopped knocking the grandparents on the head and started giving them babysitting authority, which is not to say that we should knock our elderly on the head. We should not. It's definitely good that we keep them around, and it's fine to give them babysitting authority, but just remember that when you're giving someone babysitting authority, that then they're going to start molding that next mind.
Right.
And that creates a hierarchy.
Right.
So when people say that all hierarchies start with bedtime, no. All hierarchies start with grandparents. I'm not anti-grandparent. It's just important to understand the process.
Yeah, I don't think we should abolish grandparents just yet.
No, definitely not. But I mean, that's how deep hierarchies go in the system. Is like, but it's still not natural. The hierarchy came about because somebody started deciding that X people were special for Y reason.
Right.
And then as time went on, those special people became more and more important.
Right. Like, I like to remind people when they complain to me, like, okay, you complaining to me about being mad about racism, but the white people are the ones that fell for it, right? Like, y'all the ones that fell for the fake construct.
Yeah.
And this fake notion that, like, me having the melanin means that I'm different from you, or you're the one who fell for the lie. Like, I already know it's not true, but I can't force somebody who thinks it's true to unknow that, right? And that's what they believe is the truth. So, I like to tell people all the time, instead of arguing with me and telling me to ignore racism, why don't you go argue with the racist and tell them not to be a racist, and then we don't even have to have this conversation.
Exactly.
Why you tell me all this?
The whole social construct of race was specifically done to make poor white people feel good for the little extra crumb they were getting for helping the rich white people keep the slaves in line.
Yep.
And this is something that I would teach in first grade if it were up to me. If I got to draw up a curriculum, I would teach Bacon's Rebellion in first grade. Not high school, not junior high, not sixth grade.
Oh, you're so funny. They don't even teach that.
I know. They don't teach it at all. You have to hear about Bacon's Rebellion, you have to take a college class. And it has to be a really specific and arcane class.
You have to be like going into like actual specifics, or you just happen to be an extra elective.
Or you have to have a crazy professor who has a copy of People's History of America.
It's like, it'd be wild to see a professor with Howard Zinn around here at that.
There are some, but yeah, it's not in most schools anymore. They still exist. I know lots of academics who follow me and like my stuff and are definitely real communists or real anarchists. They're out there, but the system is definitely not. The academic system is soul-crushingly liberal,
right?
And
getting worse.
The only escape from that soul-crushing liberalism is to run to the far right. There's almost no other place to escape it on campus except to the far right, which is a tragedy.
That's very sad, and that sucks.
And that's one of the reasons that you see all this right-wing bullshit in supposed left-wing circles. It's all this white people stuff that we can't get rid of. Like, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm white.
There's so many like arguments on the left that I see that's just like literally, it's literally what you just said, but it's like covered in so much other shit. And it's just like if someone just is like, really, you don't want to be told. You're like, I'm white. I don't want to be told you.
So the thing is, and I will say this. I will say this because I've seen it happen to people I thought were really close friends. Nothing will turn a white person into a Nazi faster than being told they have to let someone stick a needle in their arm for the good of other people, some of whom aren't white.
Yeah, I've seen so many people
tortured. He gets tortured with the whole and I listen. Full disclosure, I'm not mad at people who are untrusting of the vaccine as long as they, don't breathe on other people and
it's like
as long as you don't think it's a fake. Like, there are ways to go about having concerns about the vaccine that doesn't require you putting other people's lives at risk, right?
Yeah.
Like there are ways to manage that don't require you being complete.
And I'm sorry, but there's still a guy from Mint Press running around claiming that a guy whose money literally funded Emily Oster and Leanna Wen, who were telling us, "Oh, it's safe to go back outside. Pandemic's over. No worries," was actually pro-shutdown. And it's like, no, he wasn't pro-shutdown. He was paying all these anti-shutdown people to make noise. It's like, no, he's definitely pro-shutdown. He called someone else stupid and a liar. And then he referred to radical leftists, say. I was like, wait. You write for Mint Press. Aren't you a radical leftist? If not, what are you? Because radical leftist is the sort of thing that, right-wingers say about liberals.
Yeah,
it's not the sort of thing that so-called leftists supposedly say about other so-called leftists. Aren't we all at least radical?
Just a little bit. And because it's like when the right says it, they're talking about Joe Biden. But when a leftist says you're a radical, what is that? Whoa.
You're a radical leftist. It's like, what is a leftist? A so-called, an assumed leftist.
Yeah, but where are they on this? Like, where are they?
Yeah,
then we can start working it from how far left we are.
Well, there's a good theory. There is a group out there that has a growing Twitter presence and a growing YouTube presence called the Center for Policy Innovation. Their Twitter handle is @CPIUSA. They are a communist think tank, allegedly. Their director is a gentleman named Caleb Mopan, who is something else. He recruited Peter Coffin, who was a generic white class first podcaster. He recruited Jackson Hinkle. So if you want to get an idea for what CPI USA stands for, listen to Jackson Hinkle a little bit.
Yeah.
It's that kind of communism.
I can't. The whole, I'm almost over the
Hello, Zainab.
Hey, Zayn. Oh, Zayn. That's my girl. I love her. So the whole I'm a leftist thing, I almost don't even want to call myself a leftist because some of the people who
the good news,
leftists,
no one will ever touch the word.
The good news is this crowd doesn't call themselves leftists. They call themselves patriotic socialists or patriotic communists.
They pull themselves out
Some
of that.
Some of them just call themselves communists, though
Pat
they make
Soch.
a lot of big. Though they what they appear to do the most is put a lot of social conservative garbage in anti-establishment leftist gobbledygook. So it's kind of Jimmy Dore if Jimmy Dore actually claimed to be a communist and knew something about theory.
He's another one, I cannot rock with.
But that's the thing is, whatever else you want to say about Jimmy Dore, his shtick is that he's a meathead who doesn't know anything. And it's true. Whereas these guys have theory, or at least they have enough theory to fake it, and yet they believe totally wrong things and have adopted totally the wrong theory.
One of those guys were Caleb Maupin, I think, and doesn't he talks about Caleb T. Maupin. I know he's been talking to Jackson Hinkle, and I know that that guy is like a national Bolshevist or some shit like that.
Well, yes, National Bolshevik is the actual tendency that I would say they belong to. Now that goes back to 1920s Germany. It is not a combination of Nazi and Bolshevik. It sort of came up around the same time, and the Nazis ended up killing most of them. The founder was put in prison and got out of prison and wasn't killed, but a lot of the others were. But they broke off from the Social Democratic Party of Germany, and they were a mix of wanting to be allies with the USSR instead of with the Western powers. But this sort of weird, very aggressive German nationalism to get revenge for World War I. So it was like all the let's go to war stuff from Hitler, but as if they were serious communists instead.
I distrust anybody who thinks being a patriot is a good thing.
Well, no, and I agree. And again, they wanted to be friendly with both the USSR and Hitler. And both the USSR and Hitler told them, no, stay away from us. We don't like the people you want to be friends with.
They're trying to play both sides.
Well, it wasn't even the both sides. It was that the ideology was based on the fact that the capitalist nations of the West were also historic natural enemies of Germany, which meant that the German nation must embrace communism and ally itself with the USSR for patriotic reasons, which is really not how you do either communism or nationalism, right? But, it was what it was. It was very suitable for the place and the time in its own weird way. And it was completely unworkable because there was no way that the German ultra-right and the USSR were going to work together cooperatively for any long term. So they were always this weird subsect of right-wing Marxists. Socially conservative Marxists is the best way to put it. And they have more in common with the German National Bolsheviks than they do with the Stalinists that they might otherwise be compared to, since Stalin was kind of socially conservative. But yeah, that's the CPI USA, folks.
Yeah. They're all, and it's like it's the constant pop-up, right? Like these people who claim to be for the people, claim to be the voice, claim to be, saying the thing that nobody, like, it's not hard to say Democrats suck. They do. It's not, this is not, you're not discovering something that people don't know.
It is apparently very hard for some of our supposed comrades to say Republicans suck.
Right. And that's the part of it. Like, I'm like, you're so busy screaming about the Democrats. Like, okay, that's great.
Then you retweet
you guys
Tulsi Gabbard.
Everybody, like, they all suck. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Like,
Tulsi Gabbard is
time and space where like one is actually worse than the other. Like they all suck. Like they really are that bad. They all suck. And I have, I'm one of few people who, like, I don't really do the fraud squad thing, and not because I think they're doing a great job, but because, like, I don't know what that situation is like, right? Like, I'm not going to assume that I know what it is to be, like, one of few minority women in that position and what they're dealing with and what, like, I have no
Well,
idea, so I don't make any
I,
assumptions.
I,
But I do know I'm not going to run for that position because I'm not doing it, right? Like I'm not putting myself in that situation in order to have to feel that whatever is coming with that. And so if you decide you're going to put yourself in that position on running on being a person who is going to be the voice, right? Who's going to do the thing that's different, then you really should do the thing that's different. So I'm not mad at people for doing the fraud swap. Like, I get it. I can't bring myself to really go hardcore about it because I'm not in Congress. I'm not in a seat. I'm not ever running for a seat. I have no idea what that situation is like for people.
Speaking of running for a seat, something really weird is happening in New York City right now. There is a new state Senate seat in Queens.
Mm-hmm.
And the three, there's some other minor candidates in the race too, but the three recognizable candidates are Crowley's niece, who's running again, Kristen Gonzalez, who is the DSA candidate supported by Queens DSA,
and everybody's
and Nomiki Konst,
everyone's favorite.
And Nomiki Konst is the only person in the country running for any legislature anywhere on, we really need to bring back COVID protections. And that by itself means everybody who cares about protecting disabled people in any way should be promoting that part of her campaign, even if they don't support her for office, in my opinion. The Kristen Gonzalez people, now to be fair, these are all volunteers, but one of them is an important enough volunteer that he was the one chosen to debate Walker Bragman on behalf of the Gonzalez campaign and not one of their professionals.
Damn.
These volunteers are coming this close to COVID denial, like serious Republican level, I don't need to wear a mask, COVID denial levels. Like, nobody's going to go back inside. No one wants to lock down again. Like, all this, the stuff that you would associate with either the far right or the weird edgy left, who associates with the far right over the Democrats because they're so anti-Democrat.
Yeah, I haven't really actually, to be honest, I haven't, obviously it became more of a big deal anyways when Nomiki Konst jumped in because, everybody's like, why are you jumping in? I haven't really, looked into...
I will let you in on a secret.
Yeah.
COVID is why she jumped in.
Okay.
Literally, there were a bunch of people sitting around in New York talking, all people in either media or politics, who were talking about, why is nobody talking about COVID anymore? Why isn't there anybody running on COVID protections? Why isn't anybody running for office saying, there's still a pandemic on? And so they decided
pandemic stopped making money. That's what.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that is actually why.
Was costing too much. The pandemic was creating a problem with making money. So you can't do that anymore. Not in New York. Once New York realized that all of the tourists were not going to come into New York if they had to mask and have a thing on their phone that said that they'd been vaccinated. Once that came to be the truth, they were not. I was just waiting. I was like 3, 2, like I knew
it was a countdown.
And then all of a sudden, New York Democrats are COVID deniers.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't shock me though. And I mean, the Gonzalez campaign, even it doesn't matter how progressive or how left or how socialist or whatever you call yourself, if you join the Democratic Party, you're going to be compromising everything. And that's just how it goes. And
and I'll say it's tricky. I've had more than a few conversations with people who run in districts that And as someone who has helped on campaigns and looked at it, it can be a very, very difficult thing to try and run outside of the duopoly. So the issue really has to be that you have to be strong enough to be like, I'm just like, I'll do it, but I'll say I'm a Democrat, but I'm not following along. And you have to actually do that. So that's the problem, right? Is like getting to the place where the person who runs as a socialist or as a progressive or as a whatever gets into the seat and then actually does all the things that they said they were going to do when they get there, right? Like that's the part of it that's kind of missing. You have people that are doing some of it, doing a little bit, you know, they're like,
so the reality,
they're putting a toe in the pool and like,
they're like just,
the reality of,
but don't push me too far, right? Like I love Cori Bush. Like I'm not gonna lie, and I know people be like, oh, there she goes, she's a Dem lover, whatever. I don't care, whatever.
I love Michaela Wiltz.
I think
who's running against Steny Hoyer. I've
I've
loved her since 2020.
Michaela Wiltz, I think her primary is in like 4 weeks, and she might really have a shot.
She might really have a shot this time.
She's doing well.
Should really help her. I actually used to live when they did the redistrict. If I still lived where I used to live, I would have been able to vote.
I have a friend who lives in her district. And of course I know I'm also friends with Kim, who I believe lives in her district.
Mm-hmm. And so it's just, you know, but she's somebody that I hope if this works and she gets there, that she proves everybody wrong, right? Like everybody's just she's just they're running Dem. I want people to stop stop being about the duopoly, because that's also what's creating the problem, right? Like if you're so busy condemning anybody who runs within a particular party, you might actually be missing on an opportunity for someone who is legit to get a seat.
So here's where I have to point out the barrier.
It's hard.
Here's where I have to point out the barriers. Despite the fact that I love Michaela Wiltz, and despite the fact that I support some people who are still running, Jason Call, Michaela, Rebecca Parsons, Melanie Darigo, people I really support and who I wish the best and who I really want to win, but who I'm scared for too, if they do win. Mm-hmm. Because the system is designed to co-opt you.
Right.
One of the first things that the Democratic Party does is they put you in a room with a bunch of other freshman congressmen, and for 40 hours a week, you get to play telemarketer for the DCCC, getting people to donate money to the Democratic Party.
Right.
That is your entire freshman term, is working as a telemarketer 40 hours a week.
Right.
You wonder why Congress people don't read bills? Well, the freshmen are too busy to read bills. They got to sell the Democratic Party.
Somebody has to be brave enough when they get there to be like, I ain't doing that shit.
Exactly.
Just no, like I'm just not doing that. I'm not doing that.
Now,
I'm not voting for Pelosi. I'm not calling.
They also have to be prepared. When they do that, they are not going to get committee seats.
Right.
They are not going to even be considered anything close to leadership positions in any caucus, not just the Democratic caucus.
Right.
The Progressive caucus won't even be considering them.
Shoot, they're a lost cause after they.
Well, they're a lost cause anyway. But I just want to point out that the Progressive caucus will not be considering them for caucus leadership positions if they do that.
Right.
And really,
they have to be willing. And I want somebody to be brave enough, right?
Yes.
Because they'll still win. Right? Because when all is said and done, it's your district that makes that decision. So if you decide, I'm not going to go sit in that room and make phone calls. I don't care if I'm not on a committee, but I'm going to keep pushing and fighting and coming back to my people and doing, like, they'll keep winning, right? Like it just takes one person who decides they're going to be the unicorn for more unicorns to appear. Because once one person is able to do it, then it makes it easier for the next person. The problem is, and again, this is me in my basement, like not like I ain't out there, right? So it's easy for me to be like, you just got to be brave. But I know like, I'm not gonna go put myself in any position that's gonna take me away from my kid. So there are a lot of things that I'm not gonna do. But that's what I always want people to understand, right? Like it's very, very easy to be on Twitter and to judge and to, oh, they're this and they're that and whatever. But it is not an easy thing to put yourself out there and to be in a position where you have to tell your boss essentially no, right? Like who goes to work and when their boss says like, you got to go do this thing, they're like, nah, I ain't doing that. Like, you're not gonna have a job, right?
Well,
like,
that's the most important thing to remember, though. And these people in leadership positions are not their bosses. The people in leadership positions are supposed to be first among equals, and their leadership roles are parliamentary functions.
Right. But the problem is the people in leadership roles are the ones who make the decisions about who's going to go where.
Exactly.
So it's
and they use that.
It's this constant circling the drain. Like I don't have an, listen, I guess I don't have an answer. I don't have the thing that's going to fix it. But I've had conversations with Michaela Wilkes. I've helped on her campaign. I've done things. Afeni, who I met, when I went down to help with something in Maryland, who's fantastic, is helping on her campaign. Like, I hope she wins. And I hope that she is the person who does the thing that nobody expects her to do, because she's just like that rough and rumble. Like she's like, I could see her decking somebody. Like she's that real. You know what I mean? So like, I want to see that happen, right? I want to see a person who wins prove to everybody that just because you run as a Democrat and you win, it doesn't mean you can't be the thing that you said you were going to be when you were running. The problem is it hasn't happened. And so you're always in this circle of like distrust because they all suck. Like it's so hard.
I'm going to bring this up. I always thought Rebecca Parsons, who's running in Washington State, should run independent. I believe that I don't have any direct knowledge. I just know some of the people in the circle in general. I believe there was some talk about that, and I believe that it was decided that she had too much of a chance to actually win a second primary with Kilmer, and that it was better to run as a Democrat and not as an independent for that reason.
It's tricky because there's so many people who just go down in circle. They just fill in for the D, right? Like they're not doing any research. They're not like, like I was the crazy person who was like reading on all the candidates and who, like who's really talking about the stuff, because I want to vote for the person who's about the things, right? I don't really care what letters next to your name. I want to vote for the person who's about the things that matter to me. And there are way too many people who don't do that. There are way too many people in a district that is a quote unquote Democratic district that's just going to vote for the Democrat. Like they really are. They're just going to vote for the Democrat. So to make this assumption that like, oh, you can run as an independent and do something different and run it, it is much harder in some districts than people think it is. Now, if you're living in a place where no one really cares, right? Or where it's okay to do the independent thing, it's different. You have some leeway and some choice, but for some districts, you don't have, like, it would have been crazy for Michaela Wilkes to not run as a Democrat. It really would have been. Like no one would have paid her any mind. Like they wouldn't have even paid her any attention. So
if you're running in Illinois, it's crazy not to run as a Democrat. If you're running here in Oregon, it's pretty crazy not to run as a Democrat. Now, I have a friend Amanda Seaby, who's seriously talking about an independent run in 2024. And I really hope she runs. But while there's lots she can do in an independent run that she maybe can't do in a primary campaign because she gets to go for the whole general election, she doesn't have the same chances of winning as an independent that she would in a Democratic primary.
Right.
And I respect that. If that's what she chooses to do, I'm still going to support her.
Right.
But the chances of actually winning as an independent here are not.
The system is not set up to allow people to do that. It's not even set up to allow people who win their damn primary as a Democrat to be able to do the thing that they're supposed to do. I mean, when you think about what happened in Buffalo, where they all coalesced behind the old dude, even though he didn't win the primary, and helped him with his writing campaign and ousted the socialists. Like, this system is not set up to allow for people to really have a voice in the system. It's just not. That's not what it's set up to do. And it's going to take really and truly some people who are willing to die to force change in order for even a little bit to happen, right? Like, Martin Luther King had to be willing to be like, all right, I'm going to start talking about money and start talking about poor people and start talking about how problematic it is that all these things work together. And he had to know that once he started saying that this was going to be a problem. Malcolm X was only a little problem until he started saying, wait, why aren't we working together? Then he became a big problem, right? Like Fred Hampton was a problem because he convinced people to let the racism go and to work together. Like, that's what made him a problem. So, if you're really going to be about forcing change and really being a voice towards fixing things, you gotta be willing to die for it, because you really might. Now, I'll tell you straight up, that ain't me, right? Like, I'll say it on Twitter. Like,
oh, you know what I mean?
I'll say it here. I might yell it in the street, but like, I'm not putting myself like legit out there so that somebody can come send the FBI after me. I ain't doing that.
Well, I mean,
they might already be, but still.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Once you've said it on Twitter, there's a good chance they're already after you. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not going to pretend that I probably don't have FBI agents watching my show. I mean, the only reason they wouldn't is because I don't have an audience. But I mean, that's a whole different issue. Right. If anybody ever comes after me, I'm going to know why, and I'm going to feel like, well, okay, they noticed at least.
Right. But we also, they're so good at covering it up, right? Like, hiding. Like, nobody really knows a lot of the stuff that Malcolm X talked about. A lot of people don't know what Martin Luther King was really talking about when he started getting in trouble. Like, people think that the Black Panthers worked with racists, and that Fred Hampton was willing to work with the racists. Like, they don't understand that he actually got people to let all that stuff go. So it's this consistent, like, slight retelling of history, slight change in the facts, slight change. So
I gotta head out.
Okay, have a great night. We're sorry about that.
Time.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks for having me on again.
You have a great night, Z. Thanks.
I know. I just read. I can hear the little one getting ready for bed. I actually got to go too.
We should.
But yeah, it's whenever you have that constant change of historical fact, people don't understand that there were no one knows.
What? Even if you watch the Denzel Washington movie, the Denzel Washington movie about Malcolm X doesn't show him speaking to mostly white audiences at the Socialist Workers' Party in the last year of his life.
Right. Right.
And Malcolm X speaking to white people was so much more dangerous.
Yep.
As the powers that be saw it than Malcolm X just speaking to other black people.
Right.
And that was what it was with King too, because the first place in his career where King ran into trouble was when Bobby Kennedy said, don't just go to the South, you should go to the North too and talk about housing issues there. And so Martin Luther King Jr. went north to Detroit and got run out of town by the Detroit PD. Right. And the Detroit media would not cover him the way that the Southern media would.
Right.
And as a result, the Detroit PD was able to get away with running Martin Luther King's housing discrimination protests out of town.
Right. Because it's okay to talk to black people about racism, but don't talk to white people about classism.
and don't even talk to white people about why they especially don't talk to white people about why they shouldn't be racist.
Right.
Because that was the whole thing is, I mean, whether it's Fred Hampton or whether it's the Students for a Democratic Society or whether it's the free speech movement in California, what made the 60s so dangerous for people in power and why they've done so much to kill free education and the quality of public education since is you had educated white kids with lots of theory working hand in hand or corresponding with black people in the inner city and saying to each other, we're in this together.
Right.
I mean, you can criticize Students for a Democratic Society a lot, but number one, they actually did work in working class communities in Chicago. They were not afraid to go to poor white neighborhoods the same way that DSA is now. Not all DSA. I should always add that. Not all DSA.
But on that note, we do have to, because I don't want to miss sending my little one to bed.
Yes. And no, so just on that note, remember, African National Congress killed judges, and they erased that from history.
Absolutely.
You should remember that. It's important.
I agree.
Everybody have a great night.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to you.
Thank you, Renee.
Bye.
Bye. And folks, I'll tweet at you.